Hey, welcome back to the channel. My name's Troy Mayers. I am pumped to have you here because in today's video, we're going overhead. Overhead camera rigs. What's the point? Why do they exist? And more importantly, how do you do it? I love an overhead shot. I don't know what it is about them. There's just something that when I see them done and I see them executed well, it gets that beat in my chest pumping, right? It gets me excited. There's oftentimes a real symmetrical frame that comes with it. You get this unique perspective. They're awesome. And I'm always looking for an excuse to throw in an overhead shot if it makes sense. And that's an important topic that I want to touch on just a little bit. Overhead shots are great when they make sense. I'm a big advocate for this idea that every decision that we make as cinematographers when it comes to creating our images, we should have a reason behind that. There should be a conscious decision that we've made for all of the different aspects of creating a great image, whether that's your camera angle, your focal length choice, whether to move the camera or not. They all play a really important factor in the way we make our viewer feel. And I think sometimes that gets lost, but it's the most important thing. What are we conveying through our image? And more importantly, what emotion are we evoking? So when we make the decision to use an overhead shot in our films, we're putting our viewer in this really omniscient perspective. We're giving them this all-knowing position separate from our character or our object in the scene. And because of our scenes down here and our viewer is removed from that scene, they get to learn things that maybe the character that's in the scene wouldn't get to know. So they get some interesting insights that makes for, if nothing else, it makes for really interesting storytelling tools. One I want you to kind of keep in your back pocket as you go forward from this video and into your future career as a cinematographer. Another reason to use an overhead shot is to make an actor or a subject feel small, right? Like I said earlier, we've got our viewer pulled away from our subject and we're looking down on that subject. And anytime we look down on something, it feels inferior, it feels small. So if that's something that you want to do, that's a great decision that you can make and a great way that you can show that imbalance of power through your camera positioning. And there's something really interesting that happens with the position of the camera and the height of the camera as it relates to that balance of power. Right now, you and I, we're equals. We're on the same playing field. It's just kind of this eye line level shot and we feel this balance, like we're on the same playing field. If I were to drop my tripod down low and you guys were looking up at me in this shot, I would feel, real superior, right? And vice versa, if I had an overhead shot going right now, and you were looking down on me, I would feel small. So that's something to be very conscious of as you make your decision to use an overhead shot or not. One other really good use of an overhead shot is to convey and give importance to a detail that's in the frame, a detail that might have been missed in traditional coverage. And a great example of this is unboxing videos. I am an absolute sucker for unboxing camera videos. If you've made a camera unboxing video, there's a good chance that I've probably watched it. And a part of every good unboxing video is that obligatory top-down shot of the desk. You got the box right in the middle with like a couple trinkets scattered about the corners to make it look cool, right? But smack in the middle of this overhead shot is the box, and there's no mistaking that is an important detail. And that's a great way to use an overhead shot. So let's unpack this. How do you go about pulling off a shot like this? Well, I would be remiss not to emphasize the safety considerations that come with a top-down shot. We are taking a calculated risk when it comes to overhead shots, and one of them is our expensive camera equipment. And we would all be devastated if our camera were to fall to the earth, right? Nod your head yes, we would be. That would be devastating. More than that, when we're doing an overhead shot, we probably have our camera boomed over an object or, more importantly, a subject or talent, i.e. another human being. And we want to make sure that they are safe as well. So be sure to take any and all safety considerations when doing overhead shots and then some. There are more than a couple of ways to go about rigging a camera in this fashion, and the main consideration is going to be the overall weight of the camera and the lens package that you want to rig up overhead. For the absolute smallest set of cameras, the smartphones out there, the iPhones, maybe the Canon M50 or say the Sony a6600, that type of camera, I think you can get away with using a light stand with a small boom extension on it, or I've even seen microphone stands being used really pretty effectively for this type of shot. It's very easy to set up, it's very lightweight, and it can be fast and efficient, especially if you just need a really quick shot. Maybe it's one insert you're doing. That could be a really viable way to go, given the quality that we're getting out of these really small cameras now. Moving up from there to kind of our mid-tier in this range, this is most of our mirrorless cameras, say Canon R5, Sony a7S III, that size of camera, maybe that 3 to 5 pound range. This is where you're going to want to upgrade from the light stand to a C stand. C stands are much beefier, much sturdier, and much more capable of supporting the weight that we're going to want to put on it with this type of camera. Let's go set one up. All right, so for today's practical demonstration, we're going to set up that top-down unboxing video shot that you know I love so much. We're actually going to unbox the Hollyland Mars M1 monitor. I'm a big fan of this monitor. I purchased one myself. It's sitting on top of my C70 right now as my primary on-camera monitor. And then Hollyland has sent me this second one that we're going to use in today's video, and you'll get a real-world application of how this is such an incredibly versatile tool. So to set up our top-down shot, we're going to need a conveniently placed C-stand. It's almost like I knew I was going to need this. My C-stand is on wheels. I try to have all of my stands and desks and things on wheels here in my studio because it helps me move stuff around, because I'm moving stuff around all the time. Setting up a C-stand. Now, the first thing you need to take a look at is the positioning of your knobs or knuckles. You want these knuckles to be on the right side of your stand as you stand behind it. Now, the reason for this is as we go to boom our camera out over the table here, the weight of that camera is going to actively be working with these knuckles to make them even tighter than they already are. If we get that wrong and we have the knuckles on the left side and we boom our camera out, this is going to be working against the knuckle, and it's going to be loosening this joint or any other successive joints that we apply to this afterwards. And probably when you least expect it, it's going to fall down. And that is, of course, not what we want to do. So make sure we get the knuckles or knobs on the right side. The next thing with the C-stand worth knowing is you want the tallest leg or the longest leg to be directly underneath of your load. It's a little bit counterintuitive to what I thought when I first got started, so I wanted to make that clear to anybody else. Truthfully, when I first used a C-stand, I put the tall leg backwards because I thought it was supposed to be kind of like a seesaw, and you would put the sandbag on the back and that would counterbalance the camera on the front. That is not the case at all. So make sure you put the tallest leg underneath of your load. That's the way they're designed to be used, and you'll end up with a much more stable foundation to build your overhead rig off of. We're going to want to start with a pretty standard grip head. This often comes with a C-stand if you were to purchase one, but it's got a baby pin receiver that fits right on top of the baby pin that comes on top of the C-stand. On the other side is this variable grip head. There's 3 different sized holes on here, and they all tighten down. The thing worth noting here, we want to make sure that this knuckle is again on the right side, so we're working with gravity. So that's what we have going on here. Next, we're going to need the actual grip arm. I've got one over here. It's already attached to another grip head, so we'll just set that aside. This is a pretty standard grip arm, and it is designed, again, to work with C-stand components, and it can just slot right into the largest hole here, and I can tighten it down. And we now have our horizontal extension piece attached to our C-stand. I'm gonna rotate this so you can kind of see what's going on here. It's taken out like so. All right, so now we're going to take a look at some of my favorite ways of adapting from a grip arm to ultimately an Arca Swiss plate, which I have attached to the bottom of the R7 here. And we're going to start that by using one of these jaw-like clamps that have a few 1/4-20 and 3/8 mounts kind of throughout. That will eventually just clamp right onto our C-stand arm just like this. But before we get too far, we're going to introduce our next piece, and that is a spigot, is what these are called. And this one has a 1/4-20 and 3/8 inch thread on either side. I'm going to thread my 1/4-20 into my jaw, like so. And now I have what's very helpful for us is a 3/8 male threaded end here. And just so happens that this pretty standard ball head that I have with an Arca Swiss quick release on top also has a 3/8 female thread on the bottom. So as you might have guessed, we'll thread these together. And I think you can see where we're going with this. Now, when I'm doing an overhead rig in this scenario, I like to rig this in a manner where most of my weight is going down. Again, I want gravity to be working with me and not against me. So I'm gonna rig it just like so. The other maybe alternate would be to rig it out to the side like this. The reason I don't like to do that is as I put weight out further away from my axis point here, this is gonna want to rotate down anyway. So rather than fight gravity, let's use it to our advantage. And we're going to rig this ball head facing downward. And the reason we can do that and it works is because this has a notch cut out in it that allows this ball head to swivel around ultimately to a 90-degree angle. We've got our C-stand in place, we've got the grip arm, we've got the rest of our contraption all the way to an Arca quick release plate, and we can just clamp our camera on, and we have a safe overhead camera rig. All right, so we have our camera rigged up. We are finally ready to start making some banger top-down vids, right? Pumped about it. There's one more problem though that we're gonna have when it comes to doing top-down videos or photos, and that's gonna be actually viewing what our camera is seeing. Our camera is well above us now. We can't see the monitor super well. There is, of course, the flippy screen that you could use, but when it's up that high, it's pretty hard to actually compose a successful image looking at just that. So there's a couple ways that I'm going to suggest that you use to skirt this, to get around this problem. And the first one is going to be to attach an actual larger monitor to your camera rig, so long as your C-stand will support it, and in this situation, it certainly will. So I've attached the Hollyland Mars M1 monitor to the R7 to get a clean feed from the camera, and I can just glance right up here at my camera and see on a large 5.5-inch display exactly what that camera is capturing, and it allows me to compose my image in such a way that I can get my box just right in the center, right where it needs to be. The other thing about the M1 Mars that I love so much, and the reason that I'm using it for my own personal production company, is the fact that it's a beautiful on-camera monitor, but it's also a well-designed 3-in-1 tool. It's got all of the onboard monitoring capabilities that you'd expect out of a 5.5-inch monitor, but you're also getting a wireless transmitter or a wireless receiver all bundled into one in a very well-designed package. I've tried using other wireless transmission solutions in the past, be that the in-camera ones on the apps, and oftentimes those are laggy at best, and you can't hand that off to a director or a client to view. I've tried using external separate wireless transmitters, and they work, and a lot of them work really well, but it requires a separate power supply and a separate HDMI feed to run into that separate device. And as a minimalist filmmaker, the math didn't add up. It wasn't worth bringing and adding all of those pieces to my rig to be able to get the wireless feed, so I often went without. And then comes the M1 monitor, which takes all of these factors into consideration and combines it into one well-designed, unified product that just works. I've got the M1 attached to the R7 up there, so I can view it that way. And then I have that set up to stream to my second M1, which I have down here as something of a client monitor or a director's monitor, or in this case, for an overhead rig, a monitor that I can view without having to always be looking up at the overhead monitor. So again, I can be here and I can adjust, say, my box, or I can adjust my scene accordingly as to what I'm seeing right here in front of me. And this has just worked. Like I said, I don't like to use my phone for filmmaking purposes because I have an iPhone mini and it's got a mini screen, so having a 5.5-inch display is great. It's 1,000 lumens, so it's plenty bright for what I need it to do. The color is very accurate, and then it's a small package that's designed really well. There's no wires, there's no bulky antennas, and it runs off of common NPF batteries, and depending on the size of the battery that you use, these can last you for a very long time. I've got nothing but good things to say about the M1 monitor thus far for the way that I've been using it. And then because this is a dedicated tool, we get all of the features and functionalities that you would expect out of a monitor. So we have our exposure tools, we have our vector scope, a histogram, zebra functionality, and focus peaking. Then we can also use things like false color and different aspect ratios. We can input our own display LUTs. This is something I do very frequently. I have LUTs that are ready to go so I can monitor an image on set that's going to be closer to what I'm going to do with it in post. And there's a handful of different tools and features that come with having an actual dedicated monitor like this that just makes our jobs as cinematographers so much easier. The top-down shot, the overhead shot, the elevated shot, whatever you call it, I absolutely love it. I commend everybody out there that has done a successful top-down shot. It is no small feat, but absolutely worth the effort. I'm sure that there's something that I've missed when it comes to overhead rigs as far as different adapters. Maybe there's an adapter that you've been using to rig up your camera in non-traditional ways. I'd love to hear about that down in the comments below. I'll be down there. I love the conversation that happens down there. So come join us down there on your way down there. Make sure you hit like, hit subscribe, do all the YouTube things, and I will see you in the next video.